5 a.m. I stood in the dark hallway, barefoot on cold hardwood, when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice from the kitchen. "The pills are working. Dad's losing it." I flattened my palm against the wall. My son Kyle answered. "Soon we can file the paperwork." 8 months. 8 months of fog, lost words, shaking fingers. I thought grief was breaking me. They'd been drugging me. If you're still with me, please subscribe and drop your location in the comments. It means everything. 58 years old, and for 32 years I listened for imperfections that most people couldn't hear. The last day at Sonic Ranch Studios started quiet. It didn't stay that way. I packed my Sennheiser headphones into their velvet-lined case, coiled the cables I'd brought from home, and ran my hand along the Neve console one final time. 32 years of union work. 32 years of commercial jingles, local radio spots, and the occasional country album that almost made it. The studio smelled like warm electronics and old carpet, the same smell it had the day I walked in as a 26-year-old cable runner who thought he knew everything about sound. I knew nothing back then. The job taught me. My supervisor, Harold Ranke, a gruff man with hearing aids he refused to admit he needed, shook my hand at the door. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Bev needs me." He nodded, didn't argue. In this business, you learned when words added nothing. I drove home with a box of personal equipment on the passenger seat and Beverly waiting on the front porch. She stood when I pulled into the driveway, one hand pressed to her stomach. The tumor was already growing. Pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came 3 weeks earlier, delivered by a specialist who couldn't meet our eyes. "How was your last day?" she asked. Quiet. She smiled. That was always enough for her. Beverly had been a hospice nurse for 25 years. She'd held hundreds of hands at the end. She'd comforted families who couldn't comfort each other. She'd seen every way a person could leave this world, and she'd chosen to be present for all of them. Now I would be present for hers. The next 18 months compressed into a series of medical appointments, medication schedules, and middle-of-the-night conversations when neither of us could sleep. I learned to administer injections. I learned which food she could keep down and which would make her sick within the hour. I learned the difference between pain that could be managed and pain that had to be endured. Beverly taught me during those months, too. Not deliberately, but in the way she talked about her work when the morphine loosened her tongue. "You'd be surprised how often it's family," she said one night, her voice thin. "The ones who should protect you. They see a pension check, a house, and suddenly love becomes arithmetic. That won't happen to me. Everyone thinks that." She reached for my hand. "Promise me you'll watch out." After, "Bev, promise." I promised. She died on a Tuesday in March, the same day our son Kyle called to check on her. I held her hand while her breathing slowed, then stopped, then didn't start again. The hospice team came. They were gentle, professional, and efficient. They'd done this hundreds of times. I hadn't. The house became a museum after she was gone. Every room held something of her. The kitchen smelled like the herbs she'd grown on the windowsill. The bedroom still held the indent of her body on her side of the mattress. I couldn't change the sheets. I couldn't open her closet. I couldn't walk past the bathroom without seeing her reflection in the mirror that wasn't there anymore. I woke at 3 a.m. most nights, chest tight, staring at the ceiling. Food lost its taste. I ate because the body demanded it. At a table set for one, the chair across from me empty. 2 months after the funeral, Kyle called. "Dad, I've been talking to Meredith. We want you to come live with us." I sat in Beverly's reading chair, holding the phone like it might break. "I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be. We have the space. Cody misses you." He paused. "And honestly, Dad, we could use the help with the mortgage. Things have been tight." That was Kyle. Never quite direct, but honest enough to make you feel the obligation. "How tight?" The number came out slowly. Student loans from Meredith's abandoned MBA program, credit cards, an underwater mortgage, $127,000 total. Kyle's IT support salary covered the basics, but Meredith's pharmaceutical sales commissions had been inconsistent, and the gap kept widening. I thought about the empty house, the silence that pressed against my ears every night. Cody's face, 7 years old, with his grandmother's gentle eyes. Let me think about it. I didn't need to think about it. I needed to convince myself it wasn't running away. A week later, Meredith gave me the tour. Kyle hung back, hands in his pockets, while his wife showed me the converted garage. "We wanted you to have your own space," Meredith said, touching her gold necklace. "Your own entrance, your own bathroom. Independence." The room was 14 by 20 feet, concrete floor covered by a thin area rug. One window facing the backyard. A mini split-A unit mounted near the ceiling. The exterior door she'd mentioned opened onto a patch of grass between the garage and the fence. I looked at the concrete floor, the single window, the door that led nowhere but the side yard. "It's perfect," I said. I sold the house Beverly, and I had shared for 28 years. The market had recovered since the crash, and after paying off the remaining mortgage, I cleared $340,000. More money than I'd ever held at once. Meredith suggested I contribute to their debt. Kyle looked at the floor. I made a different choice. The state attorney's office smelled like leather and old paper. James Whitfield, a man in his 60s who'd handled Beverly's will, reviewed the documents I'd brought. "An irrevocable trust," he confirmed. "For your grandson's education, $180,000, with you as trustee. Once it's established, the funds can't be accessed for any other purpose without court approval." That's what I want. You understand, that includes yourself. You won't be able to touch this money. I understand. He nodded, made notes, and didn't ask why I was protecting my grandson's future from his parents. Lawyers learned not to ask those questions. The remaining $160,000 went into my personal savings. I didn't mention the exact amount to Kyle or Meredith. When they asked about the house sale, I said the market had been softer than expected. Meredith's eyes narrowed, but she didn't push. Moving into the garage bedroom took one afternoon. Most of Beverly's things went to storage. The facility smelled like metal and old cardboard. Her clothes went to charity. Her nursing textbooks went into boxes I stacked in the corner of my new room, unable to donate them, unable to open them. I set up my vintage audio equipment along one wall. The Telefunken Preamp I'd acquired in 1997, a pair of Newman monitors I'd rescued from a studio closing, My personal collection of condenser microphones, each one wrapped in static-free cloth and stored in foam-lined cases. Meredith watched from the doorway while I arranged cables. "What is all this? Recording equipment." "My hobby," she smiled. Her mouth moved. Nothing else did. "Must be nice, having that kind of free time." My first pension check arrived on the 15th of the month. $4,200 deposited directly into my account. 32 years of union contributions calculated down to the penny. Meredith explained the household arrangement over dinner that night. She'd taken over managing the budget because Kyle found finances stressful. My pension would cover the mortgage shortfall, roughly $2,800 per month. The remaining $1,400 was mine to keep. "For personal expenses," she said. "'S whatever you need." Kyle focused on his plate. Cody asked if Grandpa wanted to see his new dinosaur. I moved through the first months like a man learning to walk again. Mornings in the garage with my equipment, afternoons in online forums where enthusiasts debated the sonic character of different vacuum tubes, evenings watching Cody play while Kyle retreated to his basement trains and Meredith worked her territory. The hot sauce started as a distraction. Beverly's recipe developed over 20 years of experimentation. Cayenne, habanero, roasted garlic, and a secret ingredient she'd never written down but had whispered to me during one of those late-night morphine conversations. I made a batch in the garage, using a camp stove and the cast-iron pot we'd brought back from our honeymoon in New Orleans. The smell filled the small space, sharp and alive. Kyle accepted the first jar with mumbled thanks. 3 days later, I found it in the kitchen trash, unopened, buried beneath coffee grounds and eggshells. I made more jars anyway. Cody became my anchor. He'd knock on the garage door in the afternoons, clutching crayon drawings he wanted to show me. Trees that looked like green explosions, houses with crooked windows, picture labeled Grandpa and me, showing 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall with gray scribbles for hair, one small with a smile taking up half his face. I taped every drawing to my wall. "What are those?" he asked one day, pointing at my equipment. "Old radios, kind of. They look funny." I picked him up and set him on my workbench, careful to keep him away from anything fragile. He studied the Telefunken preamp with serious concentration. They record sound, every voice, every instrument, every little noise you can hear, and some you can't. These machines catch it all and keep it safe. Like catching butterflies? Like catching butterflies. He leaned against my shoulder. "Grandpa?" "Yeah, I miss Grandma. Me too, buddy." We sat there together while the afternoon light slanted through the single window. For a few minutes, the weight on my chest lifted. Beverly's voice came back to me at unexpected moments. Warnings I'd dismissed when she was alive. Stories from her hospice work that I'd half listened to while reading the paper or checking email. "There was a patient last week," she'd said once, maybe a year before her diagnosis. Lovely woman, 74. Her son-in-law was giving her Benadryl in her evening tea. Not enough to hurt her, just enough to make her confused. They wanted control of her accounts. What happened? We reported it. The family contested. Said she was declining naturally. Beverly's jaw had tightened. The case is still in court. Meanwhile, she's in a facility, and they have power of attorney. That's awful. It happens more than you'd think. After I'm gone, Duane, watch out. Family can be the cruelest when they smell money. I'd laughed it off. This was Kyle, the boy I'd taught to build model trains in the garage when he was 8, the teenager who'd cried at his mother's bedside during chemo, the man who'd called every Sunday while I was caring for Beverly. My son would never hurt me. 6 months after I moved in, the confusion started. It began small. I'd walk into the kitchen and forget why I was there. I'd lose track of what day it was, then what month. My hands trembled when I tried to sign checks for Meredith, the pen leaving shaky lines across my signature. "You okay, Dad?" Kyle asked one evening after I'd asked about Thanksgiving plans for the 3rd time. Meredith watched from the kitchen island. Her expression was neutral, attentive. "Fine," I said, "just tired." But I wasn't fine. The symptoms worsened, particularly in the mornings. By afternoon, I'd feel almost normal, but each dawn brought fresh fog. Grief, I told myself. Beverly had warned me about this too, how it could manifest physically, how the mind could betray the body. Meredith started preparing my coffee each morning. She'd have it ready when I emerged from the garage, steaming in the mug Cody had given me for Christmas. "World's Best Grandpa," printed in bright red letters. "You don't have to do that," I said the first time. "I don't mind," she smiled, touching her necklace. "It's the least I can do." The coffee tasted slightly bitter, but I attributed that to a new brand. I drank it every morning, grateful for small kindnesses in a house where I often felt more tolerated than welcomed. One morning, Cody wandered into the kitchen while I was drinking. He wrinkled his nose. "Grandpa, your coffee smells weird." Meredith's hand froze on the counter. She turned toward the coffee maker. "It's just a new blend, honey. Go get ready for school." Cody left. I finished my coffee. The fog rolled in an hour later, thick and disorienting. Morris called that afternoon. My older brother, 64, and retired from Columbus Police after 3 decades on the force. "How's the new living situation?" "Good," I said. "Fine." "You sound off." I held the receiver against my shoulder, searching for the date on the wall calendar. Couldn't find it. "Retirement brain," I said. "You know how it is." He didn't push, but I heard the concern in his silence. Beverly's textbooks remained in their boxes, gathering dust in the corner of my garage bedroom. Geriatric pharmacology, palliative care nursing, recognizing elder abuse. I hadn't opened them since she died. The sight of her handwriting in the margins would have broken something in me that was barely holding together. I attributed my confusion to grief catching up, to the isolation of the garage, to age, to loneliness, to the particular cruelty of outliving the person who made life worth living. I never connected it to the morning coffee. Meredith kept a notebook in her home office. Dated entries documenting every episode of confusion, every repeated question, every trembling signature, building her case one observation at a time. Kyle retreated further into the basement. His model trains grew more elaborate, the 1950s Pennsylvania Railroad rendered in painstaking detail. The hobby I'd taught him as a child. His door stayed closed for hours. I watched my world shrink. The garage, the forums, Cody's visits, which seemed to happen less often now, scheduled around times when I was at my worst. And each morning, Meredith stood at the kitchen counter with my coffee. "Here you go, Dad." I took the mug. The world's best grandpa mug. "Thank you," I said. "You're too kind." She watched me drink. Every morning. Same mug. Same bitter taste. Same fog an hour later. "Dad seems confused today, doesn't he?" Meredith said it while I sat across from her at the dinner table, fork halfway to my mouth. She addressed Kyle, not me. As if I'd already left the room. As if I'd already left the conversation. As if I'd already left the category of people worth speaking to directly. Kyle looked at his plate. "He's had a long week," she nodded, touching her gold necklace. "I noticed he asked about the mail twice this morning." Same question, 10 minutes apart. I set down my fork. "I'm right here." Meredith turned to me with that smile. The one that showed teeth without moving her eyes. "Of course you are, Dad. We're just worried about you." She started calling me Dad more often after that. Each time, the word carried less warmth and more condescension. "Dad, did you take your heart medication?" "Dad, you left the stove on again." "Dad, why don't you let me handle the checkbook from now on?" The medications came next. I kept my prescriptions in the bathroom cabinet. Blood pressure, cholesterol, the low-dose aspirin my cardiologist had prescribed after Beverly's death, elevated my numbers. One morning, every bottle sat in a different position. Labels I'd memorized now faced the wrong way. "I organized them for you," Meredith said when I mentioned it. "Morning meds on the left, evening on the right, just trying to help." Something felt wrong, like a mix where one track had been shifted half a beat, barely perceptible, but enough to unsettle everything. I couldn't identify what had changed, only that something had. I nodded and walked away. By the time I reached the garage, the thought had already dissolved. Morning coffee became her exclusive domain. She'd have the mug ready when I emerged from the garage, world's best grandpa, filled to the brim, steam curling toward the ceiling. "You don't have to keep doing this," I said one morning, reaching for the coffee maker. Meredith intercepted my hand. "I insist. You shouldn't have to bother with it." She pressed the mug into my fingers. "Besides, I make it just the way you like it." I drank. The bitter edge had become familiar now, part of my morning. Kyle retreated further with each passing week. When conversation turned to my condition, he'd find a reason to check on his trains. The basement door would close, and I'd hear the faint hum of transformers powering his Pennsylvania Railroad layout. The hobby I'd taught him when he was 8 years old. He spent more time down there than he spent with his son. Cody still visited my garage bedroom, but the visits grew shorter. Meredith would call him for activities I'd never heard scheduled. Soccer practice on a Tuesday. Piano lessons that moved from Thursday to the precise hour when my head felt clearest. Playdates with children whose names changed week to week. "Cody can't come to dinner, Dad. He's got homework." Cody was 7. His homework took 15 minutes. I stopped arguing. Everything felt distant, negotiable, unimportant. I'd start a sentence and lose the end of it before the words reached my mouth. One afternoon in late February, I walked into the garage and stopped. The workbench sat in front of me, covered with my audio equipment. I knew this room. I knew these tools. but I couldn't remember why I'd come. I stood there for 4 minutes. BB5. When clarity finally returned, my shirt was damp with sweat and my hands were shaking. A week later, Meredith handed me a pen and a stack of utility bills. "Just need your signature, Dad." The pen trembled in my grip. My name came out wrong, letters tilting at angles I couldn't control. I had to steady my right hand with my left. Meredith watched me sign every trembling letter. When I finished, she gathered the bills with an expression I couldn't read. "What day is it?" I asked Kyle the following morning. "Thursday." I nodded, made a mental note, repeated it silently. "Thursday, Thursday, Thursday." 10 minutes later, at the breakfast table, "Kyle, what day is it?" He looked at me. His face did something complicated. "Thursday, Dad. Still Thursday." I didn't remember asking the first time. Meredith kept a notebook. I discovered this by accident, walking past her office while she sat at the desk with the door ajar. Her pen moved across lined paper in quick, precise strokes. I caught a glimpse of the page before she noticed me and closed the cover. March 15. Couldn't recall breakfast. Asked what he ate. No memory. Documenting for Dr. Stahl. She looked up, smiled. "Just keeping track of household expenses, Dad. Nothing interesting." I nodded and walked away. By the time I reached the garage, I'd forgotten what I'd seen. The phone calls started in March. Meredith's voice carried through the thin walls, clinical and concerned. "Yes, we've noticed significant cognitive decline over the past few months, memory impairment, confusion, difficulty with fine motor tasks." Pause. "The tremors are getting worse, actually. My father-in-law, yes, he lives with us. We're his primary caregivers now." I sat in the living room while she spoke in the kitchen. Her words drifted through the HVAC ducts like smoke. "We'd like to schedule an evaluation with Dr. Stahl. I understand she handles guardianship assessments." Guardianship. The word should have alarmed me. Instead, it floated past, another piece of information my brain couldn't quite grip. Kyle emerged from the basement that evening looking pale. He stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Meredith load the dishwasher. "Meredith, I need to—" "Not now." She didn't turn around. "Cody has a spelling test tomorrow. Go help him study." Kyle started to speak, then stopped himself. He glanced toward the living room where I sat. For a moment, his eyes met mine. Then he looked away and walked upstairs. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake in the garage bedroom, listening to the house settle, trying to remember what I'd done that day. Fragments surfaced. Breakfast. A phone call. Cody waving from the window. But the sequence wouldn't hold. The pieces refused to connect. One night in mid-March, I woke to voices. The master bedroom sat directly above the garage. Sound traveled through the ceiling, muffled but audible if I strained. 6 more weeks, maybe 8, and we can file the paperwork. Meredith's voice, confident, certain. "We're so close I can taste it." Kyle's response came quieter. Pressed my ear to the pillow, trying to catch the words. I never said I wanted this, Meredith. You said he wouldn't suffer." "Suffering?" Her laugh was short, dismissive. "He doesn't even know what day it is. This is a kindness, Kyle. Think of the debt. Think of Cody's future." Silence. Then the basement door creaked open and shut. Kyle's footsteps descended to his trains. I lay in the dark, heart pounding, trying to understand what I'd heard. The words made sense individually. Together, they formed a shape I couldn't quite see. File the paperwork. He wouldn't suffer. A kindness. By morning, the conversation had faded to dream logic. I couldn't be sure I'd heard anything at all. The next day brought my worst episode yet. I woke in the garage bedroom and didn't recognize it. The walls seemed wrong. The window was in the wrong place. My equipment sat on the workbench like artifacts from someone else's life. I tried calling Morris that afternoon. My older brother, 64, and retired from Columbus Police after 3 decades on the force. Picked up the phone, started to dial, and stopped. I couldn't remember his number. 40 years. I'd known that number for 40 years. It was gone. Morris called me back an hour later. He'd noticed the missed call, the hang-up. "You okay, Duane?" "Fine," I said. Senior moment. You know how it is. Do I? His voice carried the weight of 30 years investigating crimes. Because you don't sound fine. I made a joke about retirement brain. He didn't laugh. A few days later, Meredith announced she'd be attending a pharmaceutical sales conference in Cincinnati. 3 days, Thursday through Saturday. A regional training event for Mercer Pharma territory representatives. "Kyle will take care of everything while I'm gone," she said, touching her necklace. "You just rest, Dad. Focus on feeling better." She left Thursday morning at 6 a.m., her suitcase rolling across the driveway while I watched from the garage window. The house fell quiet. I made my own coffee that morning, used a different mug from the cabinet, a plain white ceramic I found in the back. The coffee tasted the same as it always had before I moved in. No bitter edge, no strange aftertaste. By Thursday afternoon, I noticed something had changed. My thinking felt marginally clearer. Not perfect, the fog still hung at the edges. But I could hold a thought for longer than 30 seconds. I attributed it to a good night's sleep, to Meredith's absence reducing my stress. Friday morning, I made my own coffee again. By noon, my hands had stopped trembling. I stared at them for a full minute, maybe 2, flexed my fingers, made a fist, opened it, made it again. No shake. No tremor. The first stillness in weeks. Friday evening, I tried calling Morris. The number came without effort. For 5055 57834. 40 years of knowing that number, and it was back. I didn't place the call. I sat in my garage bedroom with the phone in my steady hand, and felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the inadequate insulation. Saturday morning, my memory worked. I remembered breakfast, remembered conversations from Friday, remembered Kyle's awkward dinner attempts, his inability to look me in the eye, his retreat to the basement the moment the meal ended. The fog was gone, and the only variable, the single difference between this weekend and every week before it, was the coffee Meredith made for me each morning. 3 a.m. Saturday night. I stood in the kitchen, fully alert, while the house slept. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the distant highway. The stillness pressed against my ears. The world's best grandpa mug sat in the dish rack, washed and waiting for Monday's routine. I touched the ceramic, felt its weight. Thought about Cody giving it to me last Christmas, his face bright with pride. Thought about Meredith filling it every morning, watching me drink, documenting my decline in her little notebook. My legs carried me back to the garage bedroom. The boxes sat in the corner where I'd stacked them 8 months ago. Beverly's things. Her clothes had gone to charity. Her books remained. I opened the first box. Geriatric Pharmacology. Palliative Care Nursing. Recognizing Elder Abuse. My wife's nursing textbooks filled with her handwriting in the margins. Notes from 25 years of caring for patients at the end of their lives. I opened Geriatric Pharmacology to the index, found the entry I was looking for, turned to page 247, haloperidol, a first-generation antipsychotic, used primarily for schizophrenia and acute psychosis. Beverly had underlined the side effects section and written in the margin, "Watch for this in family caregiving situations." Side effects: confusion, memory impairment, tremors, sedation, difficulty with fine motor tasks. Onset within 30-60 minutes of oral administration. Effects: can mimic dementia in healthy patients. Every symptom matched. I read the section 3 times. Cross-referenced other medications. Nothing else fit the specific pattern. The morning onset, the gradual afternoon clearing, the particular combination of cognitive and motor symptoms. Beverly had warned me. In her medication notes, in her midnight conversations, in the stories she told about patients whose families had drugged them into compliance. It happens more than you'd think. Family can be the cruelest when they smell money. I closed the textbook and sat on my bed. The world's best grandpa mug, Cody's gift, the delivery mechanism for 8 months of poisoning. I turned pages without trembling, followed arguments without losing the thread. My mind was working again and I understood exactly what my son and daughter-in-law had been doing to me. I should have confronted them, should have called the police, called Morris, called anyone who would listen. Part of me wanted to walk upstairs right then and shake Kyle awake, demand to know how he could do this to the father who taught him to build trains, who held his mother's hand while she died, who gave up everything to care for a woman he loved. But 32 years of recording had taught me something. The truth lives in the silence between words. What someone doesn't say reveals more than what they do. And if I wanted the full truth, every conversation, every plan, every detail of what they'd done and intended to do, I needed evidence. Not accusations. Evidence. I looked at the vintage Telefunken Preamp on my workbench, the Newman monitors, the collection of miniature condenser microphones I'd accumulated over 3 decades, professional equipment, the tools of my trade. Tomorrow, Meredith would return from Cincinnati. She'd make my coffee. She'd watch me drink. She'd document my confusion in her notebook and make phone calls about guardianship. And I would let her, because starting Monday, I would be recording everything. The first pink light of dawn touched the garage window. I sat among Beverly's textbooks, her margin notes, a voice from beyond death, and made my decision. I would not confront. I would not accuse. I would not give them the chance to destroy evidence, to coordinate stories, to gaslight me into believing I'd imagined everything. Instead, I would listen, the way I'd listened for 32 years, for every imperfection, every off note, every frequency that didn't belong. And when I had enough, I would let them hear themselves. Confront them now, and I become the confused elderly man who thinks his family is poisoning him. Document everything first, and I become the witness with evidence. 32 years in recording studios taught me that evidence wins arguments. Not emotion, not moral authority, evidence. So I resumed drinking the coffee. Every morning, I emerged from the garage bedroom and accepted the world's best grandpa mug from Meredith's hands. I thanked her. I smiled at my grandson. I lifted the ceramic to my lips and let the bitter liquid touch my tongue. Then I excused myself to the bathroom and poured it down the drain. The act required precision. I needed to appear confused without being so impaired that they'd accelerate their timeline. I asked the same questions twice, but not 3 times. I fumbled with my keys but found them eventually. I forgot what day it was in the morning and remembered by dinner. Her eyes tracked the liquid level as I drank each cup. So I developed a technique. I'd take a long first sip, set the mug down while distracted by Cody or the morning news, then carry it with me toward the bathroom before anyone noticed I'd consumed less than half. Kyle walked into the kitchen one morning while I sat at the table. He opened the refrigerator, stared inside for 30 seconds, closed it without taking anything, and left. Never looked at me once. My son. The boy I'd carried on his shoulders at the state fair. The teenager who'd cried when his mother started chemotherapy. The man who was helping his wife poison me into incompetency. I watched him avoid my gaze and felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just a cold clarity, like the moment in a recording session when you isolate the track that's ruining the mix. Meredith and Kyle left for work at predictable times. She departed by 7:45 a.m. for her pharmaceutical territory. He followed at 8,005 for his IT support shift. The house sat empty until at least 5:30 p.m. when Kyle returned first. 9 hours, more than enough time. On March 3rd, I entered Meredith's home office for the first time since moving in. The room occupied what had been the second guest bedroom before Kyle's trains claimed the basement. Pharmaceutical sales materials covered the desk, glossy brochures for cholesterol medications, sample request forms, a laminated territory map with colored pins marking physician offices. A ring light stood beside her laptop, positioned for video calls. Motivational quotes in cheap frames lined one wall. The filing cabinet sat in the corner, 2-drawer, gray metal, with a small lock beneath the top handle. I started with the desk. Top drawer, pens, sticky notes, business cards organized by specialty. Middle drawer, expense reports, mileage logs, training certificates. Bottom drawer, personal items. Hole, a spare phone charger. Emergency tampons. A stack of business cards held together with a rubber band. Beneath the cards, I found the key. Small, brass, the type that comes standard with basic filing cabinet locks. Meredith had hidden it under the cards rather than on her keyring. Not secure enough for serious protection, but enough to keep Kyle, or a curious child, from accidentally discovering what lay inside. The lock turned smoothly. The top drawer held financial records. Tax returns, mortgage statements, the credit card bills I'd seen Meredith reviewing at the kitchen table. I noted the balances. $18,347 on the Visa, $7,892 on the Discover, $8,000 $200 on a store card I didn't recognize. Combined with the mortgage and student loans, the total exceeded what Kyle had quoted me by nearly $15,000. The bottom drawer held pharmaceutical samples, boxes of cholesterol medication, blister packs of blood pressure pills, bottles of anti-nausea tablets, all properly labeled with physician sample markings, the kind Meredith collected and was supposed to distribute during her territory visits. And one orange prescription bottle bearing her name. The label read, Meredith Czerny, Ativan 0.5 mg. Take 1 tablet by mouth as needed for anxiety. Dr. James Horowitz, prescriber. Filled at CVS Pharmacy on February 12th. The bottle felt light. I unscrewed the cap. Inside sat small white tablets, round, flat, scored down the middle. Nothing like the oval Ativan pills I'd seen in Beverly's nursing references. I held one up to the window light. The imprint, a small H25, matched the haloperidol reference photos in Beverly's textbooks. An antipsychotic, a medication that caused confusion, memory problems, and tremors in healthy patients. I'd need proper testing to confirm, but the marking left little doubt. The prescription said Ativan. The pills said something else entirely. I photographed the bottle from every angle. The label with her name and the fake prescription. The contents with the wrong tablets visible. The location in the filing cabinet drawer. The timestamp on my phone camera would verify when and where I'd taken each image. Then I returned the bottle exactly as I'd found it. Closed the drawer, locked the cabinet, replaced the key beneath the business cards in the bottom desk drawer. I walked out of the office without leaving a single trace. 3 weeks after I began my surveillance routine, Easter Sunday arrived. 14 family members descended on Kyle and Meredith's colonial revival, carrying casserole dishes and wine bottles and the particular energy of extended family gathering for a holiday. The house smelled like roasting turkey and competing perfumes, the chaos of forced cheer filling every room. My brother Morris arrived early. 64 years old, retired from Columbus Police after 3 decades, with the watchful stillness of a man who'd spent his career detecting lies. He found me in the garage bedroom before the main crowd arrived. "How you holding up?" he asked. "Good days and bad," I said. "You know how it is." He didn't respond immediately. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the audio equipment, the boxes in the corner, the single window facing the backyard. Cops noticed details. It's why I needed to maintain the performance even with family. "Kyle says you've been having some memory issues." "Grief brain," I shrugged. "Bev warned me about it. Said the body processes loss in strange ways." Morris nodded slowly. Beverly was always the smart one. He didn't push further, but I saw the question behind his eyes, the cop instinct that said something didn't fit. The house filled with relatives I saw once a year, Kyle's aunts and uncles from his mother's side, cousins with children who'd grown 3 inches since last Christmas, my niece Rachel and her husband, who'd driven 4 hours from Cleveland. Cody found me immediately. He wrapped his arms around my waist and pressed his face against my stomach. "Grandpa, Mom says you're getting better." "Is it true?" Meredith stood at the kitchen island, watching. "I'm feeling clearer today, buddy." I ruffled his hair. "Good days and bad." Can we look at the radio machines later? You promised to show me how they work. After dinner. If your mom says it's okay. Meredith smiled, the one that didn't reach her eyes. The morning routine proceeded as expected. Meredith prepared my coffee in the world's best grandpa mug, adding cream and sugar the way I supposedly liked it. I accepted the cup with theatrical gratitude, holding it in both hands to emphasize a slight tremor I'd been practicing. Thank you, sweetheart. You're too kind to me. It's my pleasure, Dad. I carried the mug toward the bathroom, nodding vaguely at relatives who greeted me, playing the part of an elderly man navigating a crowded house. In the bathroom, I locked the door and poured the contents down the drain while running the tap. When I emerged, coffee cup empty, Meredith's eyes found mine across the room. I smiled at her, confused, grateful. Harmless, dinner seated 14 around the extended table, with extra chairs borrowed from the basement and children relegated to a card table in the corner. Turkey, stuffing, green bean casserole, the sweet potato dish Beverly used to make that Meredith had attempted with less success. Conversation flowed. Updates on jobs and children and health concerns. Someone's daughter had gotten engaged. Someone's son had changed colleges. The currency of extended family traded across the table like cards in a game whose rules everyone understood. Meredith waited until the main course plates were cleared. I wanted to share something with everyone, she said, standing beside her chair. Kyle and I have scheduled a cognitive evaluation for Dad. The table went quiet. 14 faces turned toward me. Morris set down his wine glass. What kind of evaluation? Dr. Rebecca Stahl at Riverside Medical Complex. She specializes in geriatric neurology. Meredith touched her gold necklace, the gesture I'd learned to recognize. It's just precautionary. We've noticed some concerning patterns, and we want to make sure Dad gets any support he might need. She turned to me with practiced warmth. You understand, right, Dad? We just want what's best for you. I picked up my fork. Let it slip from my fingers. It clattered against my plate. I'm sorry, what month is it? The murmur started immediately. Sympathetic sounds from Kyle's aunts. Concerned glances between cousins. My niece Rachel reached across the table to touch my hand. It's April, Uncle Duane. Easter Sunday. Of course. I smiled vaguely. Easter. Right. Kyle stared at his plate throughout the exchange. His fork hadn't moved in 3 minutes. When Morris's gaze swept toward him, he pushed back from the table. I'll get the desserts ready. He disappeared into the kitchen. Meredith continued her performance, answering questions about Dr. Stahl's credentials, the appointment timeline, the importance of early intervention in cognitive decline. Oh, Morris said nothing, but his eyes stayed on me. After the meal, I offered to help clear dishes. A familiar routine from decades of family gatherings when Beverly and I would work side by side at the sink while relatives drifted toward the living room. I positioned myself near the kitchen doorway while Meredith spoke with Kyle's Aunt Patricia. It's so hard watching him fade, Meredith said, her voice carrying the precise tone of exhausted caregiver. We've done everything we can at home, but we're reaching a point where we'll need to make some decisions about his care. Patricia made sympathetic sounds. You're handling it so well, Meredith. Not everyone would take on this responsibility. Family takes care of family. I scraped leftover food into the trash and said nothing. Morris found me alone in the garage bedroom an hour before the guests departed. He closed the door behind him and spoke quietly. "Something's not right here, brother." I looked up from the workbench where I'd been arranging cables. Confused, vague, the performance I'd perfected over weeks. "What do you mean? 3 months ago on the phone, you were sharp. Remembered everything, asked about my fishing trip, knew the name of my new neighbor." He moved closer. "Today you're fumbling forks and forgetting what month it is. That kind of decline doesn't add up." I held his gaze for a moment. Then I let my eyes drift away, unfocused. "Good days and bad, Morris. The doctors say that's normal with grief-related cognitive issues." He didn't press, but before he left, he gripped my shoulder. "You call me if you need anything, day or night. I mean it." I nodded vaguely and returned to my cables. That night, after the last guest departed and Kyle's footsteps retreated to the master bedroom above, I pulled boxes from the corner of my room. The equipment emerged, piece by piece. Miniature condenser microphones no larger than shirt buttons, their capsules designed for surveillance rather than studio work. Voice-activated digital recorders with 72-hour battery life and 64 GB of storage each. Signal boosters that could extend wireless range through concrete walls. I arranged everything on the workbench beside my vintage Telefunken tube preamp. The preamp was a museum piece, worth more than my car, its vacuum tubes glowing warm orange when powered on. I'd kept it for the sound quality it produced, the warmth and presence that digital equipment couldn't replicate. Now, it would serve a different purpose. The housing had enough interior space to conceal modern recording equipment. Anyone searching the room would see an old man's hobby equipment, not surveillance gear. The tubes drew attention. The technology inside the casing drew none. I stood in the kitchen doorway. Hollow core doors. HVAC return vent in the ceiling. The breakfast nook where Kyle and Meredith discussed finances and plans after I retreated. First priority, Meredith's home office, phone calls to physicians and attorneys, documentation sessions at her computer, the filing cabinet with its mislabeled prescription bottle. High-value target. The master bedroom, pillow talk, unguarded conversations, the moments when people said what they actually meant. Critical for proving intent. The living room, family discussions, visitor interactions, the performative caregiving Meredith displayed for witnesses. Supporting evidence. My garage bedroom protection. If they ever confronted me directly, I wanted documentation. Kyle's Sonos speaker system ran through the home Wi-Fi network. He'd installed it 2 years ago, showing me the app that controlled music throughout the house. I'd watched him demonstrate how any authorized device could send audio to any speaker. Any authorized device, including my phone. The same technology designed for party music could broadcast recordings through every room simultaneously. When the time came to confront them, I wouldn't need to argue or explain. I would simply let them hear themselves. Ohio law was on my side. One-party consent, meaning any conversation I participated in was fair game. I'd learned this during studio work when artists wanted to record informal sessions without securing release forms from everyone present. As long as one party to a conversation consented to recording, the evidence was admissible. I lived in this house. I was party to conversations that occurred here. Every recording would be legal. March 15th, a Tuesday. Kyle left for work at 8:15 a.m. Meredith had departed an hour earlier for a territory meeting in Cincinnati. The house would be empty until at least 5:30 p.m. I carried a miniature condenser microphone to the kitchen, its wireless transmitter no larger than a matchbook. The kitchen table had solid construction, with an apron beneath the tabletop that created a hidden cavity at each corner. I attached the microphone with electrical tape, positioning it to capture conversations at the breakfast nook where Meredith and Kyle discussed their plans. The transmitter went behind the kickboard beneath the cabinets, invisible unless someone crawled on the floor with a flashlight. I tested the audio quality through my receiver in the garage. Clear, crisp, every word audible. The first microphone was installed. I stood in my garage bedroom that night, listening to the house settle around me. No traffic noise, no HVAC cycling. Just the bones of the building adjusting to temperature changes. Beverly used to say, I listened for ghosts. Maybe she was right. But now I was listening for something else. Evidence. Proof. The words my son and daughter-in-law spoke when they thought no one could hear. They'd spent 8 months poisoning me while I trusted them. Now I would spend however long it took, documenting every conversation, every plan, every detail of their scheme. And when I had enough, they would hear exactly what they sounded like. 5 recording devices. 5 locations. 8 months of patience. The kitchen microphone went in first, March 15th, beneath the table, hidden in the cavity where the apron met the tabletop. I tested the audio from my garage bedroom while the house sat empty. Meredith's territory meeting in Cincinnati. Kyle's IT support shift downtown. 9 hours of silence, broken only by the refrigerator cycling and the occasional creak of the house settling. The sound came through without distortion. Every scrape of a chair, every clink of a coffee cup, every word spoken at that table would reach my recorder. The office installation required more care. Meredith's home office held the filing cabinet with the mislabeled prescription bottle, her laptop with guardianship research, the phone she used to schedule medical evaluations. I needed to capture those calls. Her clock radio sat on the bookshelf beside pharmaceutical sales awards. But digital model with Bluetooth capability, the kind nobody looked at twice. I opened the back panel, removed the speaker housing, and installed a voice-activated recorder in the space behind. When sound reached a certain threshold, the device would begin capturing. When silence returned for 30 seconds, it would stop and save the file. I reassembled the radio and set it back on the shelf. The recording light was invisible unless you knew where to look. The master bedroom required a different approach. I couldn't enter their room during the day without explanation, and the door stayed closed at night. But the HVAC return vent in their ceiling connected to the same duct system that ran through my garage. Sound travels through ductwork. The hollow metal channels act as speaking tubes, carrying conversation from room to room if you know how to listen. I installed a sensitive condenser microphone inside the return vent in my bedroom ceiling, positioned to capture sound traveling down from the master suite directly above. The audio quality wouldn't match my kitchen installation, but pillow talk rarely requires clarity. I needed to catch the content, not the consonants. The living room microphone went behind a family photograph on the wall. Picture of Kyle and Meredith's wedding, positioned above the couch where visitors sat. Meredith performed her concerned daughter-in-law routine in that room, explaining my decline to relatives and friends who stopped by. I wanted documentation of that performance. The fifth device stayed in my garage bedroom. Protection. If they discovered my investigation and confronted me directly, I would have a record of whatever happened next. I established the evidence chain during the first week of April. Fifth Third Bank on High Street, a safe deposit box rented under my name only. I paid cash for the annual fee. The encrypted USB drives went into the box every Sunday afternoon, replaced with empty drives that would hold the coming week's recordings. Cloud backup ran automatically each night, uploading to a server in Virginia through a VPN that masked my location. The email account I used belonged to a name I invented, Robert Stillman, a retired accountant from Toledo who didn't exist. If Meredith found my recording equipment, she might destroy the devices. She might delete local files. But she couldn't reach the bank vault, and she couldn't access the cloud. The first significant capture came on April 22nd. Kitchen microphone, 6:47 a.m. Meredith's voice clear and confident. I'm accessing some samples from my inventory for Dad's anxiety symptoms, just helping manage his comfort. She was on the phone. I couldn't hear the other party, but her responses told me everything. No, nothing prescribed. These are just to help him sleep. He's been so agitated at night. But pause. Haloperidol, yes. Low dose. My territory manager won't notice a few samples missing. 3 syllables that confirmed everything. Played that recording 17 times. Each replay transformed suspicion into certainty. She was poisoning me with antipsychotic drugs and calling it comfort care. By the end of April, I had accumulated 47 hours of recorded audio. The early captures were mostly mundane, breakfast conversations, phone calls to friends, the rhythms of a household that thought no one was listening, but threaded through the ordinary moments were the conversations that mattered. May brought the dosage conversation. Master bedroom captured through the HVAC duct at 11:23 p.m. He's building tolerance. Meredith's voice, slightly muffled but audible. The confusion isn't as reliable anymore. We need to increase it. Kyle's response came quieter, harder to parse. I ran the audio through noise reduction software, isolating his frequencies from the background hum. Meredith, I don't know. This is getting what? Effective? Because that's exactly what it's getting. But I just think maybe we're going too far. Going too far would be spending the next 30 years paying off debt while your father sits in that garage playing with his radios. Her voice sharpened. Going too far would be watching Cody grow up without college money because we couldn't make the hard choices. Silence. I'll pick up more samples Thursday. The line that haunted me came in June. Kitchen recording, 7:15 p.m. Meredith and Kyle finishing dinner while I sat in the garage, headphones pressed to my ears, listening in real time. Once we control the pension, we can pay off everything and still have $3,000 a month to invest. Kyle's fork scraped against his plate. What about the house? He asked. What about it? I mean, eventually, when he's in a facility or whatever. We keep the house. His pension pays for his care. Medicaid kicks in after we've protected the assets." She laughed, a short sound without humor. "I've done the research, Kyle. There's a whole system for this. We just have to work it." I cataloged that recording under financial motivation and flagged it for the Thanksgiving playback. The true crime discovery came in July. Office microphone, capturing Meredith working from home on a Wednesday afternoon. She was listening to a podcast while organizing samples in her closet. I could hear the narrator's voice in the background, describing a case from Florida where a caregiver had drugged an elderly woman for access to her accounts. "They got caught because of the paper trail," Meredith muttered to herself. "Idiots. You never leave a paper trail." She paused the podcast. "We won't make that mistake." I found her podcast history that weekend while she attended a regional sales meeting in Cleveland. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, face down, password protected. But her laptop in the office used the same password as her email, and her email used the same password I'd watched her type while standing behind her at the kitchen island 6 months earlier. Her true crime podcast subscriptions totaled over 400 hours of content. Dateline episodes, 48-hour segments, independent shows focusing on financial crimes, elder abuse, inheritance fraud, each episode a tutorial in what went wrong, how investigators caught the perpetrators, which mistakes to avoid. August brought Kyle's confession. Not to me, to himself. The basement door creaked at 11:47 p.m. I heard his footsteps through the living room, then silence as he descended to his trains. My recording device in the garage couldn't capture basement audio, but I'd installed a backup microphone behind the HVAC return in the hallway weeks earlier. Sound rose through the ductwork. Kyle's voice, thick with something that might have been alcohol, might have been tears. "Mom would never forgive me." The trains hummed on their tracks. Transformers clicking. The sound of a man retreating to the only place he felt safe. "She'd never forgive me for this." I sat in my garage bedroom with headphones pressed to my ears and listened to my son talk to his trains about things he couldn't say to anyone else. I stood, walked to my door, put my hand on the knob, stood there for 30 seconds, then sat back down and let the recording run. The education trust conversation came in September. Kitchen microphone, 8:34 p.m. Cody had been in bed for an hour. Kyle and Meredith sat at the table with laptops open, running numbers. His pension for 15-20 years could yield over $750,000. Meredith's voice carried the satisfaction of someone admiring their own work. That's not even counting the education trust. Kyle's typing stopped. What about the trust? Once we have guardianship, we can petition for modifications. It's Cody's money anyway. We should control it. The chair scraped as Kyle pushed back from the table. "Meredith, that money is for Cody's college. Dad set it up specifically so we couldn't touch it. And once we're his guardians, the court can modify the terms. Urgent family need. Financial hardship affecting the minor's welfare." She laughed. "I've read the cases, Kyle. It's not hard. $180,000. The money I'd set aside to protect my grandson's future. The funds I'd placed in an irrevocable trust specifically because I didn't trust Meredith's financial judgment. She wanted it all. By October, my evidence archive exceeded 200 hours. I maintained a spreadsheet with every file cataloged: date, time, location, participants, content summary, relevance rating. The kitchen microphone alone had captured 73 hours of incriminating conversation. I documented my own recovery in parallel. A symptom journal, handwritten in Beverly's nursing notebook. March 15th through November 3rd. March 15, mild confusion, hand tremor, forgot appointment time. March 28, significant fog after morning coffee. Cleared by afternoon. April 12, unable to recall conversation from previous day. Tremor prevents steady handwriting. The entries continued through summer and fall, tracking the pattern I'd already identified. Symptoms appeared within an hour of consuming the coffee Meredith prepared. They faded by late afternoon. On days when I secretly disposed of the drugged coffee, I experienced no symptoms at all. November 3rd, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I stopped drinking the coffee entirely. The performance continued. I accepted the world's best grandpa mug each morning, carried it toward the bathroom, poured it down the drain. I fumbled my keys. I asked repetitive questions. I played the confused old man they needed me to be. But my hands stopped trembling. My memory sharpened. The fog lifted and stayed lifted. November 6th, symptom journal, no confusion, no tremor, full cognitive function. November 9th, completed New York Times crossword in 14 minutes. Normal pre-retirement time. November 12th, recalled every detail of yesterday's conversations. Memory function fully restored. I made my own appointment with Dr. Rebecca Stahl, the same neurologist Meredith had chosen for my competency evaluation. December 15th, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. When Dr. Stahl ran her tests, she would find a 58-year-old man in full possession of his faculties. No confusion, no cognitive decline, no justification for guardianship proceedings. The medical evidence would prove what 8 months of recordings documented: deliberate poisoning, not natural decline. The Sonos system required less technical skill than my recording installations. Kyle had shown me the app 2 years earlier, proud of the technology that let him play music throughout the house from his phone. I downloaded the same app, connected to the home Wi-Fi, authorized my device as a controller. November 14th. While Kyle worked his IT shift and Meredith visited physicians in her territory, I tested the system. Selected an audio file. Pressed play. My own voice emerged from every speaker simultaneously. Living room, kitchen, master bedroom, Cody's room, the basement where Kyle built his trains. The whole house filled with sound I controlled. The phone weighed nothing. The power it held weighed everything. The speakers that played party music would soon broadcast evidence of attempted murder. I called Morris on November 17th. My brother answered on the second ring. "Duane, everything okay? I need you at Thanksgiving dinner." "Say, I'm already coming. Kyle sent the invitation last month. I need you there early, and I need you to trust me." Silence. 3 decades of investigating crimes, processing my words. What's going on? Something's happening. I can't explain on the phone, but I need a witness. Someone with credibility. More silence. Then I'll be there at noon. Whatever this is, I've got your back. Bring your patience. And your cop face. You're going to need both. November 23rd, 5 days before Thanksgiving. I sat in my garage bedroom with the evidence package spread across my workbench. Prescription bottle photographs, time-stamped and cataloged. The symptom journal with 7 months of entries. Beverly's nursing textbooks, her margin notes highlighting medication-induced cognitive impairment. The USB drives containing 200-plus hours of recordings. I selected 12 minutes of audio for the Thanksgiving playback. The drugging discussions. The financial calculations. The education trust raid. Kyle's basement confession. Meredith's true crime research notes, each excerpt chosen for maximum impact. Each one impossible to explain away. The same witnesses who might have signed affidavits supporting incompetency would hear exactly what kind of care Meredith provided. I made Beverly's hot sauce that afternoon. The cast iron pot on my camp stove, cayenne and habanero, and roasted garlic filling the garage with heat and capsaicin. My eyes watered. Beverly would have laughed. The secret ingredient she'd whispered during those morphine nights. She'd warned me about this. Family can be the cruelest when they smell money. I hadn't listened, but I'd prepared anyway, some part of me knowing that her warnings came from 25 years of watching families destroy themselves over inheritance. 14 jars sat cooling on my workbench by evening, one for each family member attending Thanksgiving dinner. Beverly's recipe. Beverly's presence at the confrontation. 8 months ago, I was a confused old man being poisoned into incompetence. Now I held enough evidence to destroy them both. 5 days, 14 witnesses, 12 minutes of their own voices. The colonial revival filled with turkey smell and cinnamon candles when I arrived in the kitchen at 7 in the morning. Meredith stood at the island, basting brush moving in measured strokes, the picture of a daughter-in-law preparing the family meal. "Good morning, Dad." She didn't look up from the turkey. "Coffee's ready. Your mug is on the counter." The world's best grandpa mug sat where it always sat. Steam curled from the bitter liquid inside. "I've already had some, thank you." Her basting brush paused mid-stroke. She turned, and something flickered across her face before the practiced warmth returned. "You made your own coffee?" "Woke up early. Couldn't sleep." I watched her process this information. 8 months of routine, broken. 8 months of control, slipping. Her eyes moved from my face to my hands, checking for tremors that weren't there. "Well, that's wonderful, Dad. You must be feeling better." "Much better." I held her gaze, clearer than I've felt in months. She set down the basting brush and touched her gold necklace. The gesture she made when lying, when calculating, when the script needed revision. "The family will start arriving around noon," she said. "Kyle's setting up extra chairs in the dining room. Why don't you rest until then?" I nodded and walked toward my garage bedroom. Behind me, I heard her pick up her phone. Morris arrived at 11:30, half an hour before anyone else. His Crown Victoria pulled into the driveway, and I met him at the side entrance near my garage. "You look different," he said, studying my face. "Sharper." "I am different." He glanced toward the main house, where Meredith's silhouette moved behind the kitchen window. "Whatever's happening, I'm here." I gripped his arm. "Wait for dessert. Watch the reactions. Don't interfere unless I ask." His cop face settled into place. the face that had sat across from confessed murderers without flinching. "I trust you, brother." The family arrived in waves. Kyle's Aunt Patricia and her husband drove up from Cincinnati. My niece Rachel and her husband had made the 4-hour trip from Cleveland. Cousins, with growing children, in-laws I saw once a year, the extended network of Czernys who gathered for holidays and funerals and little else. Each one greeted me with the particular kindness reserved for the declining. Gentle handshakes, slow, careful sentences, the sympathetic tilt of heads. "How are you feeling, Uncle Duane?" "You're looking well, Dad. Good to see you up and about." I played my part through the early afternoon. Mild confusion about names. A moment of hesitation before finding my chair. Small stumbles that reinforced 8 months of careful performance. Meredith watched from the kitchen island, organizing appetizers, directing Kyle's placement of folding chairs, maintaining the fiction of a concerned daughter-in-law, managing an impossible situation. Then Cody broke away from her. He sprinted across the living room and wrapped his arms around my waist, pressing his face against my stomach. "Grandpa," Mom says, "you're getting better." "Is it true? 7 years old." Beverly's gentle eyes in his small face. The one person in this house who had never stopped believing in me. I crouched to his level and put my hands on his shoulders. "I'm feeling much clearer, buddy." His smile took up half his face. The same smile from the drawings taped to my garage wall. "Can you remember things now?" "Like before?" "Like before." Meredith's voice cut across the room. "Cody, come help set the table." He squeezed my hand once, then ran to his mother. She watched him go, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. I smiled at her, clear, present, unafraid. Dinner proceeded through appetizers and turkey, and the green bean casserole that someone had burned slightly on one end. 14 people around the extended table, children at the card table in the corner, the currency of family news exchanged across the table. Patricia's daughter had gotten engaged. Rachel's son was applying to law school. Someone's business was expanding. Someone else's was struggling. The rhythms of family, performing itself for an audience of relatives. Kyle sat at the far end of the table, not eating. His fork moved food around his plate without lifting anything to his mouth. When our eyes met, he looked away. Meredith orchestrated the meal from her position near the kitchen, refilling water glasses, directing conversation, touching her gold necklace whenever someone asked about my health. "He has good days and bad," she told Patricia. "We're hopeful the evaluation next month will give us some answers." I ate my turkey and said little. The audio files on my phone sat ready. The Sonos app was loaded, the speakers mapped, the playlist queued. Dessert arrived. Pumpkin pie, apple pie, the chocolate torte Rachel had brought from Cleveland. Coffee went around. Conversation loosened. Guards came down. The moment I set down my fork and stood. 14 faces turned toward me. The table fell quiet, that sudden hush that follows unexpected movement at a family gathering. "I'd like to say something." Meredith's hand moved to her gold necklace. Kyle's fork clattered against his plate. "For the past 8 months," I said, "I have been recording conversations in this house." The silence deepened. Rachel's husband looked at his wife. Patricia's hand found her napkin. Ohio is a one-party consent state. Everything I captured is legal evidence. I pulled out my phone, the Sonos app already loaded. I'd like to play some of it for you." Meredith's face drained of color. The practiced warmth vanished, leaving something raw beneath. Kyle pushed back from the table, but he didn't stand. His hand went to the back of his neck, rubbing the spot he'd rubbed since childhood whenever stress became unbearable. Morris leaned forward. I pressed play. Meredith's voice filled the house. Every speaker, every room. The same technology that had played Christmas music and party playlists now broadcast her words through the colonial revival. "I'm accessing some samples from my inventory for Dad's anxiety symptoms. Haloperidol, yes, low dose." Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Tears came immediately. The recording continued. 6 more weeks, maybe 8, and we can file the paperwork. "We're so close, I can taste it." Kyle's voice now weak and pleading. I never said I wanted this, Meredith." "You said he wouldn't suffer." Meredith's dismissive response. "Suffering? He doesn't even know what day it is." "This is a kindness, Kyle. Think of the debt. Think of Cody's future." I stood beside my chair while my son's complicity echoed through his own home. Patricia wept openly, her napkin pressed to her face. Her husband stared at Kyle with an expression of disgust I'd never seen from him before. The financial calculations came next. His pension for 15-20 years could yield over $750,000. That's not even counting the education trust. Then Kyle's voice, "What about the trust?" Meredith's response, "Once we have guardianship, we can petition for modifications. Urgent family need, financial hardship affecting the minor's welfare." Rachel's husband was shaking his head. My niece had tears running down her cheeks. The true crime analysis followed. They got caught because of the paper trail. Idiots. You never leave a paper trail. Pause. We won't make that mistake. 12 minutes. Every damning conversation. Every calculation. Every confession. Morris had his phone out, texting rapidly. His cop face hadn't changed, but his fingers moved with the speed of a man alerting his network. The recording stopped. The house fell silent, except for Patricia's sobs and the distant hum of the refrigerator. Cody sat at the children's table, staring at his mother. His small face held an expression I'd hoped he would never have to wear. The look of a child understanding for the first time that parents could be monsters. Meredith broke the silence. "This is taken out of context." Her voice shook, but she pushed through. "He's manipulating the audio. He's confused. You all know he's confused. You saw him at Easter, asking what month it was, dropping his fork." She looked around the table, searching for allies. "He set this up. He's paranoid, delusional. This is exactly the kind of behavior that shows he needs professional help." Morris spoke. His voice carried the weight of 30 years of interrogations. "I was a cop for 30 years. The table went still. That's not manipulated." He set his phone down. "That's a confession." Meredith opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Kyle was crying openly now, tears streaming down his face, his hand still rubbing the back of his neck. He hadn't looked at me since the recording started. He couldn't. I reached into the bag beside my chair and pulled out a jar of hot sauce. Beverly's recipe. The cast iron pot and the camp stove and the cayenne and habanero and the secret ingredient she'd whispered during morphine nights. I set it on the dining room table. I'd like everyone to take a jar home. 14 pairs of eyes moved from the jar to my face. My wife made this recipe. She spent 25 years as a hospice nurse, watching families destroy each other over money. I looked at Kyle. She warned me years ago about exactly this. She said, "Duane, after I'm gone, watch out. Family can be the cruelest." My son wouldn't meet my eyes. Last, his shoulders shook. I didn't listen. I should have. The words I'd been carrying for 8 months rose to my throat. The ones I'd practiced in my garage bedroom late at night when the house was silent and Beverly's textbooks lay open on my workbench. "You were my son." Kyle looked up. His face collapsed. The muscles around his eyes gave way. His jaw went slack, and whatever story he'd been telling himself died in that moment. "Order, she was your mother, and you let this happen." I turned to Meredith. She stood frozen at her end of the table, hand still on her gold necklace. What remained beneath the practiced warmth was something I hadn't seen before. Fear, raw and unfiltered. "Dr. Stahl's evaluation is still scheduled for December 15th, I said. "I'll be there." I paused. "I imagine my results will be quite different from what you expected." Then I turned and walked toward my garage bedroom. Behind me, the silence erupted. Patricia demanding answers. Rachel's husband on his phone. Children at the card table asking questions no one wanted to answer. I didn't look back. My garage bedroom door closed behind me with a quiet click. The audio equipment sat on my workbench where it had always sat. The Telefunken Preamp, the Newman monitors, the tools that had recorded 32 years of music and 8 months of betrayal. Beverly's nursing textbook lay closed on my desk, her handwriting in the margins, her warnings heeded. I sat in my chair and listened to the chaos in the main house. Raised voices, crying, the front door opening and closing as family members fled, a holiday turned reckoning. No satisfaction came, no triumph. Just the hollow weight of a man who had saved himself by destroying what remained of his family. The hot sauce sat on the dining room table. 14 jars for 14 witnesses. Beverly would have understood. She'd spent 25 years watching families fracture over estates and inheritance, watching children become predators and parents become prey. Family can be the cruelest when they smell money. She'd been right about that. A knock on my door, soft, hesitant. I didn't answer. The knock came again, then stopped. Footsteps retreated. I stayed in my chair, surrounded by recording equipment and nursing textbooks and the fading smell of turkey from a Thanksgiving dinner that would never be forgotten. 8 months of evidence, 12 minutes of playback. One family, shattered beyond repair. Outside, a car started, then another. The extended family fleeing a house that now held nothing but poison and truth. I thought about Cody's face. That expression no 7-year-old should wear. The moment when a child learns that love can be conditional, that protection can be pretense, that the people who feed you breakfast might also be feeding you something worse. He would need someone now. Someone who would never betray him. I closed Beverly's textbook and set it aside. The house grew quiet as the last cars departed. Somewhere inside, Meredith was making phone calls, building defenses, preparing the story she would tell. Somewhere else, Kyle was crying alone, his model trains humming in the basement, The hobby his father had taught him now, just another reminder of what he'd destroyed. Morris texted at 7:15. Already made calls. APS and Franklin County DA will want your evidence package. I'll come by tomorrow. I typed back, thank you. Then I set down my phone and sat in the silence of my garage bedroom. 32 years of recording had taught me that the truth lives in the spaces between words. What people don't say reveals more than what they do. My son had never said he loved me. My daughter-in-law had never stopped touching her necklace. And I had never stopped listening. The house settled around me, bones creaking in the November cold. Beverly's textbooks on the desk, her hot sauce on the Thanksgiving table. Her warnings proved right. I had won. The victory felt like ashes. Morris made calls that night. From the kitchen table, while I sat in my garage bedroom, listening through the recording equipment, I no longer needed to hide. Jim, it's Morris Czerny. I've got a situation. Elder abuse, chemical restraint, documented. My brother. A pause. Yeah, tonight, Thanksgiving dinner. The whole family heard it. More calls followed. Names I didn't recognize. People who answered phones at 10 o'clock on a holiday night because Morris Czerny asked them to. By Monday morning, my evidence package sat on the desk of Linda Horvath, a senior investigator with Adult Protective Services in Franklin County. Morris called me at 9:15. She wants to meet with you today. Can you be downtown by 2? I could. The APS office occupied the 3rd floor of a government building on South High Street. Fluorescent lights, gray carpet, the smell of institutional coffee. Linda Horvath sat behind a metal desk covered with manila folders and a computer monitor angled away from visitors. She was 45, maybe older, with short dark hair going gray at the temples and the steady gaze of someone who had seen variations of this story for 2 decades. Hungarian features in her face. Strong jaw. No jewelry except a wedding band. Mr. Czerny, she stood and shook my hand. Firm grip. Sit down. Tell me about your evidence. I told her, starting with the morning coffee and ending with the Thanksgiving recording. She listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she opened the file box Morris had delivered that morning. My USB drives, the prescription bottle photographs, the symptom journal, Beverly's nursing textbooks with her margin notes. 200 hours of recordings, she said. 217. She looked up. You cataloged everything? Date, time, location, participants, content summary, relevance rating, spreadsheet on the first drive. Linda Horvath leaned back in her chair. In 2 decades of elder abuse investigations, she'd probably received shoebox evidence more often than not. Crumpled receipts, confused timelines, emotional accusations without documentation. I'd given her a prosecutor's dream. This is one of the most well-documented cases I've ever seen, she said. I'm a sound engineer. Documentation is what I do. She nodded slowly. I'll need you to walk me through the key recordings. Then I'll need a formal interview recorded. After that, I'll coordinate with the Franklin County DA's office. What charges? Ohio Revised Code 2903 ... Patient abuse through chemical restraint. Section 29113.02, financial exploitation of an elder. She pulled a code book from her desk drawer. Combined, we're looking at 8 to 12 years if convicted. 8 to 12 years. I sat with that number for a moment. My daughter-in-law had tried to steal my mind, my pension, my grandson's future. 8 to 12 years seemed inadequate, but it was something. The formal interview took 3 hours. Linda recorded everything while her assistant took notes. I walked through the timeline. Beverly's death, the move to Kyle's house, the onset of symptoms, the discovery during Meredith's Cincinnati trip, the evidence gathering, the Thanksgiving confrontation. She asked about Kyle's involvement. Implicit, I said, passive, but complicit. He knew what she was giving me. He watched her do it. He never stopped her. We'll need to interview him separately. He'll cooperate. I thought about my son's face during the recording playback. The collapse. The tears. He's been looking for a way out since July. He just couldn't find one on his own. Linda's team spent the next week interviewing extended family members. Patricia, Rachel, Morris, everyone who'd been at Thanksgiving dinner, everyone who'd heard Meredith's voice through those speakers. The statements all matched. No inconsistencies, no conflicting accounts. 14 witnesses to a confession. December 15th arrived. I drove myself to Dr. Rebecca Stahl's neurology clinic on Olentangy River Road. The building was modern glass and steel. The waiting room decorated with abstract art meant to soothe anxious patients. I wasn't anxious. The nurse called my name at precisely 10 o'clock. Dr. Stahl's office smelled like hand sanitizer and coffee. Equipment hummed softly in the background. Distant voices from other examination rooms created a low murmur. She was early 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. The diplomas on her wall came from Ohio State Medical School and a fellowship in geriatric neurology at Johns Hopkins. Mr. Czerny. She shook my hand and gestured to a chair. I understand there's been some concern about your cognitive function. My daughter-in-law scheduled this evaluation. She believed I was experiencing dementia symptoms. Dr. Stahl opened a folder on her desk. I have notes here from the original referral. Memory impairment, confusion, tremors, difficulty with fine motor tasks. Is that accurate? Those symptoms were present from approximately March through early November. They've since resolved. She looked up. Resolved? I stopped consuming the drugged coffee my daughter-in-law was preparing for me. Dr. Stahl set down the folder. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining the haloperidol, the recordings, the arrest pending. She listened with the particular attention of a physician who'd seen medication abuse before, but rarely with this level of documentation. Let's run the evaluation anyway, she said finally. A clean baseline will support your case. The Montreal Cognitive Assessment took 15 minutes. 30 questions, testing attention, concentration, executive function, memory, language, visuospatial skills, and orientation. I scored 29 out of 30, missing a single point on the delayed recall section when I couldn't remember one of 5 words from earlier in the test. That's entirely normal for your age, Dr. Stahl said. A score of 26 or above indicates no cognitive impairment. The mini-mental state examination followed. Orientation to time and place. Registration of 3 objects. Attention and calculation. Recall. Language. Visual construction. Perfect score. The clock drawing test came next. She handed me a blank sheet of paper. Draw a clock face showing 10 minutes past 11. I drew a circle, placed the numbers evenly around the circumference, and positioned the hands correctly. The test measured visuospatial abilities, executive function, and conceptual thinking. Patients with dementia typically distorted the circle, misplaced numbers, or positioned the hands incorrectly. My clock looked like a clock. The verbal fluency assessment asked me to name as many words beginning with the letter F as I could in 60 seconds. I reached 23. Above average for any age group, Dr. Stahl said. She ordered blood panels. The results came back while I waited. Complete metabolic panel, thyroid function, B12 levels, and a toxicology screen. Clean. No psychoactive medications in my system. No metabolites from the haloperidol that had clouded my mind for 8 months. Dr. Stahl compiled her findings into a formal report while I sat in the examination room. Mr. Czerny, she handed me the document. This evaluation shows 0 signs of cognitive impairment. Your scores are consistent with normal aging, if not slightly above average for your demographic. I scanned the summary. Montreal Cognitive Assessment, 29/30. Mini Mental State Examination, 30/30. Clock drawing test, normal. Verbal fluency, above average. Toxicology, negative. If you had genuine cognitive decline requiring 8 months of antipsychotic medication, she continued, you would show residual impairment. The brain doesn't recover that quickly from extended haloperidol exposure. What does that mean for the case? It means the symptoms you experienced were caused by the medication, not by any underlying condition. When you stopped taking it, you recovered fully. She removed her reading glasses. That's evidence of deliberate poisoning, not natural decline. I left her office with the report in my hand and called Linda Horvath from the parking lot. I have Dr. Stahl's evaluation. Good news? Perfect scores. Clean blood work. She's put it in writing. Linda was quiet for a moment. That closes the loop. I'm meeting with the DA this afternoon. Expect movement by the end of the week. The movement came on December 22nd. I was in my garage bedroom, teaching Cody how to identify different microphone types when Morris called. They're making the arrest now. I walked to the front window of the main house. Cody followed, confused but quiet. Through the glass, I watched 2 Franklin County Sheriff's deputies approach the front door. Meredith answered. She was dressed for work, her pharmaceutical sales materials visible in the bag over her shoulder. When she saw the uniforms, her hand moved to her gold necklace. One deputy spoke. I couldn't hear the words through the window, but I could read Meredith's reaction. The practiced warmth vanishing, the raw fear underneath emerging for the second time in a month. They put her in handcuffs. Kyle appeared in the doorway behind her. His face had aged 10 years since Thanksgiving. Dark circles under his eyes, weight lost from stress and guilt. He watched his wife being led to a patrol car and didn't move. Cody pressed against my leg. Grandpa, why are the police here? Put my hand on his shoulder. Your mom did something wrong. The police are taking her to talk about it. Is she going to jail? I don't know yet, buddy. He was 7. He deserved protection from the details, but he also deserved honesty about what he'd seen. The charges came down that afternoon. Patient abuse through chemical restraint under Ohio Revised Code 2930.int, financial exploitation of an elder under Section 2930.u2. Yet 02. Combined potential sentence 8 to 12 years in state prison. Mercer Pharma terminated Meredith before the sun set. The company's HR department called her cell phone while she sat in a holding cell, explaining that employees facing felony charges related to pharmaceutical misuse were subject to immediate dismissal. Her career in pharmaceutical sales ended with a voicemail. Kyle received his own charges on January 3rd. Same statutes, same potential sentence. The delay allowed prosecutors time to review the full evidence package and prepare an offer. Linda Horvath explained it during a follow-up meeting at her office. Your son is cooperating fully. He's agreed to testify against his wife in exchange for probation and mandatory counseling. Testify about what? The scheme's development, Meredith's planning, his own passive complicity. She shuffled papers on her desk. His statement corroborates everything in your recordings. The dosage discussions, the financial calculations, the guardianship timeline. He's selling her out to save himself. He's doing what people do when they're facing prison. Linda looked at me without judgment. Your son was weak, Mr. Czerny. He was manipulated by his wife. That doesn't excuse what he did, but the DA believes his testimony will ensure conviction. I thought about Kyle's voice on those recordings. The weak protests, the moral collapse, the retreat to his basement trains when guilt became unbearable. My son had always been weak. Beverly had seen it. I'd refused to. What happens to the house? I asked. Without Meredith's income or your pension contributions, they can't make the mortgage payments. Foreclosure will follow, probably within 6 months. The $127,000 in debt remained. The house would be lost. The extended family had already begun cutting ties. Morse told me about the will changes during a visit the following week. Patricia's removing Kyle from her estate. So is Aunt Margaret. He sat at my workbench watching Cody play with a pair of headphones. Rachel said she can't trust him anymore. Her words, can't blame her. No, you can't. The Czerny family had split along a fault line. Morris's side stood with me. Kyle existed in isolation, cooperating with prosecutors while waiting for his wife's trial. Meredith faced prison and permanent exile from everyone she'd known. January brought family court proceedings. Kyle faced supervised visitation requirements as a condition of his cooperation agreement. Meredith lost all parental rights pending trial, her status as a felony defendant making custody impossible. Cody needed a placement. The social worker assigned to the case was a young woman named Sarah Chen, who specialized in family disruption situations. She met with me in my garage bedroom, taking notes on my living situation, my income, my relationship with my grandson. Mr. Czerny, given your son's legal circumstances and your documented competency, the court may consider placing Cody with you during the proceedings. I want that. It would require modifications to your living space. A child can't sleep on a cot in a garage. I looked around the room that had been my prison for 8 months. The recording equipment, the nursing textbooks, the walls covered with Cody's crayon drawings. What modifications? Kyle didn't fight the placement. He couldn't. The guilt had eaten through whatever remained of his resolve. During our single conversation about custody, he sat across from me in a coffee shop downtown, unable to meet my eyes. His hand went to the back of his neck 3 times in 2 minutes. "You'll take better care of him than I can," he said. "I know that. I'll make sure he knows his father loves him." Kyle's hand went to the back of his neck again. Does he? Does he what? Does his father love him? I thought about the basement trains, the hobby I'd taught Kyle as a child, the hours he'd spent down there while his wife poisoned his father and his son played alone upstairs. "I don't know, Kyle." "Do you?" He didn't answer. We finished our coffee in silence, and I drove home to my grandson. Cody moved into the garage bedroom in February. We pushed my cot against one wall and set up a proper bed for him against the other. His drawings stayed taped to the walls, joined now by new ones depicting our shared space. The audio equipment occupied the corner, no longer surveillance gear but teaching tools. Morris began visiting every Sunday afternoon. He brought a wooden chess set that had belonged to our father, the pieces worn smooth from decades of use. He taught Cody on a folding table near the window, explaining each piece's movement with the patience of a grandfather who'd waited years for this opportunity. The knight moves in an L shape, 2 squares, one way, then 1 square perpendicular. It's the only piece that can jump over others. Cody studied the board, concentrated in a way that made him look older than 7. Why would you want to jump over pieces? Sometimes the direct path is blocked. Sometimes you need to take the long way around to get where you're going. I watched from my workbench. Beverly's textbooks closed now, their purpose served. One evening in March, Cody found me adjusting the frequency response on a vintage condenser microphone. He climbed onto the stool beside me and watched my hands move across the equipment. "Grandpa, how do these work?" I showed him the microphone's diaphragm, explaining how sound waves caused it to vibrate, converting acoustic energy into electrical signals. "It catches every sound?" "Everything within its range and frequency response. Some microphones hear things our ears can't." He touched the microphone gently, the way a child touches something precious. "Is this how you caught Mom saying those things?" I set down my tools. "Yes." Cody was quiet for a long moment. His small face carried a weight no 7-year-old should bear. The understanding that his mother had tried to hurt his grandfather. The confusion of loving someone capable of that harm. Did Mom really want to hurt you? I paused, chose my words with care. Cody deserved honesty, but not the full weight of adult cruelty. "Your mom made some very bad choices, buddy. She wanted things she didn't have, and she convinced herself that hurting me was the way to get them. Was she always like that? I don't know. I think something got broken in her a long time ago. Something that made her believe the rules didn't apply to her." Cody looked at the microphone in his hands. "Did you know she was bad when Dad married her?" "No. I thought she loved him. I thought she loved our family." "Did Dad know?" I put my hand on his shoulder. "Your dad knew some of what was happening. He should have stopped it, and he didn't. That was wrong of him, but you didn't make those choices. And I'm going to take care of you." Cody leaned against me. The same gesture he'd made 1,000 times before, but different now. The trust of a child who understood that adults could fail and that some adults would catch you anyway. Grandpa? Yeah, buddy? Can you teach me how the radios work? All of it? I looked at the equipment that had documented 8 months of betrayal. The microphones and recorders and preamps I'd deployed as weapons against my own family. Yeah, I said, I can teach you. We worked together until bedtime, Cody asking questions about frequency and amplitude and the physics of captured sound. The machines that had saved my life becoming tools for building his. Morris stopped by before Cody fell asleep, bringing a book about Beverly he'd found in his storage unit. Pictures from her nursing school graduation, her wedding dress, the first house she and I had shared. Cody studied each photograph with the hunger of a child searching for roots. She looks nice, he said. She was. I wish I'd known her better. She would have loved you so much, buddy. She would have been so proud of who you're becoming. Cody fell asleep with the photo album beside his pillow. I sat at my workbench in the dim light, listening to his breathing settle into the rhythm of dreams. The garage that had been my prison was now a home. The equipment that had captured evidence was becoming a curriculum. The grandson who had been leverage in someone else's scheme was becoming the reason I got up each morning. Outside, a car passed on the distant highway. The house settled in the cold. Beverly's textbooks sat closed on the shelf, their warnings heeded, their purpose complete. I thought about Meredith awaiting trial, Kyle awaiting his own reckoning, the family scattered across fault lines that would never mend. I thought about the $180,000 sitting in Cody's education trust, untouched, protected, exactly as I'd intended. I thought about Beverly's voice in my memory, warning me about family, about money, about the cruelty that could live inside people you loved. Cody turned in his sleep, one hand reaching across the gap between our beds. I reached back. If you're feeling my revenge, hit like and drop a rating from 1 to 10 with your thoughts. I appreciate you. 6 months after Meredith's conviction, I signed the lease on a 2-bedroom apartment 3 miles from Morris's place. The building dated from the 1970s. Brick and aluminum siding, built when Nixon was president. The 2nd bedroom had good light and enough space for my workbench. Cody helped me load the moving truck. He wrapped each microphone in its static-free cloth the way I'd taught him, settling the cases into foam-lined boxes with the care of a surgeon handling instruments. This one's the expensive one, right? He held up the Telefunken. That one's worth more than the truck. He set it down like it might explode. The garage bedroom emptied in 3 hours. Concrete floors, inadequate insulation, the exterior door that had been isolation disguised as independence. 14 months in that room. I carried the last box to the truck. Morris had called the night before with final details. 7 years. Maximum sentence on both counts. Patient abuse, financial exploitation. Judge Hartwell hadn't been moved by Meredith's tears during sentencing or by her claims that Kyle had pressured her into the scheme. The recordings made it clear who planned everything. The education trust statement arrived the following week. $180,000 plus 18 months of modest interest. Untouched. Protected. The same amount I'd set aside in James Whitfield's office 2 years earlier, keeping my grandson's future out of reach. Beverly would have approved. Kyle completed his counseling program in March. The supervised visits began in April. Every other Saturday, 2 hours at a community center with a social worker present. The first visit, Cody came home and sat at the kitchen table while I made dinner. He pushed peas around his plate without eating. "How was it?" "Fine." I waited. "Dad cried," Cody said finally. He kept saying he was sorry. Over and over. I set down my spatula. "How did that make you feel?" Cody thought about it. 7 years old, processing betrayal and rehabilitation and the complicated mathematics of forgiving someone who'd watched you get hurt. "I don't know if I believe him yet," he said. "Take your time. Some things need to be earned back." He looked up at me. "Did you forgive him?" The question sat between us like something with weight. "I'm working on it," I said. "Some things take time." He nodded and ate his peas. The second bedroom became the workshop. I mounted the Newman monitors on the wall, positioned the Telefunken Preamp on the workbench, organized the microphone collection in their foam-lined cases along the shelf. Not surveillance equipment anymore. Teaching tools. Evenings returned to the forums. Vacuum to bevantage.net, audioengineeringlegends.org, the scattered communities of people who cared about harmonic distortion and frequency response, and the specific warmth that digital equipment couldn't replicate. A debate emerged one Thursday about the relative merits of 1962 Telefunken ELA M251 capsules versus the 1958 Newman U47 design. I'd used both over my career. I typed my response with the confidence of 32 years of experience. Cody appeared at my shoulder. "What's that?" "Old guys arguing about microphones." He leaned closer, reading the screen. "That guy says you're wrong about the frequency response. That guy rebuilt his first preamp last year. I was adjusting frequency responses before his parents met. Are you going to tell him that?" I smiled. "I'll let the facts speak for themselves. My pension arrived on the 15th of each month. $4,200 deposited directly, the accumulation of 32 years of union work. Enough for the apartment, enough for groceries and utilities, and the occasional new piece of vintage equipment when something special appeared on the market. Enough for a quiet life." Morris came by on Sundays with the chess set. Cody had progressed from learning piece movements to basic strategy, his small face concentrated as he calculated moves 3 turns ahead. "Your knight's trapped," Morris said. Cody studied the board. His finger hovered over a bishop. "Unless I sacrifice it to open the diagonal." Morris raised an eyebrow. "Who taught you that?" "Grandpa said sometimes you have to lose something to win something bigger." I watched from the kitchen, where I was making hot sauce from Beverly's recipe. Cayenne and habanero and roasted garlic, the secret ingredient she'd whispered during those morphine nights. The smell filled the apartment, sharp and alive. Cody won his first game that afternoon. Morris demanded a rematch. That evening, after Morris left and Cody worked on homework at the kitchen table, I sat at my workbench adjusting the bias on a vintage tube amplifier. The vacuum tubes glowed warm orange, the same glow I'd watched in recording studios for 3 decades. Cody appeared beside me. "So, what are you doing?" "Fixing the harmonic distortion. These old tubes drift over time." He watched my hands move across the equipment. "Grandpa, Yeah, buddy? I'm glad we live here now. I set down my tools. Me too. He went back to his homework. I returned to the amplifier. Outside, the evening light faded over a neighborhood I'd chosen, in an apartment I'd rented, building a life on foundations that couldn't be stolen or forged or betrayed. Beverly's voice still came to me sometimes, not warnings anymore, just her presence, the memory of 28 years of marriage to a woman who understood that the truth lives in silence. 32 years of listening had taught me to hear what others missed. The frequencies beneath the surface, the spaces between words where meaning hid. I'd spent 8 months gathering evidence in those silences. Now I was learning to live in them.